had to have difficult conversations? This topic, by far, is one of the topics that leaders, regardless of their level of leadership, often struggle with because we're not really taught how to have difficult conversations. And every difficult conversation is not the same. So, in this video, I'm going to share with you a few things you need to do to keep in mind to prevent yourself from having a hard time when you have those difficult conversations. Now, I want to preface this by saying that this is a live, and typically with lives, there are individuals that will join for a few moments and we'll have questions and have dialogue. So if you're watching this, you are likely watching the replay. And I want to encourage you just to hang in there with me for a minute. I do like to say hello to everyone as they join. So give me just a moment. Let me get a couple things together on my end so I can make sure I'm not interrupted during our very important live today, because I'm going to share with you some strategies that you can start using today as a woman in leadership to help you be able to get to that next level on your journey. And having difficult conversations is a part of leadership mastery. This is something that you're going to want to be able to do and master as you are advancing in your career. And the skills I'm teaching you today, strategies I'm teaching you today, will automatically set you apart from everyone else. So give me just one moment. Let me make sure I do not have any interruptions during our live today. Okay, fantastic. So, why is having difficult conversations hard? What is so hard about it? So I do want to say that I had a poll on Instagram and a poll on LinkedIn and a poll on YouTube as well, where people had the chance to vote on different topics. And one of the topics that was voted on is hard conversations at work. So why are these conversations so hard? What makes them so difficult? Why do people struggle with them? Oftentimes, we are not placed in those situations to know how to respond and deal with those very, very difficult conversations. Majority of time in leadership, there's not a book that says, okay, when this person is upset, this is how you have the conversation. Oftentimes we just have to learn it, and sometimes we just don't know what to do. So I'm going to share with you personally some difficult conversations that I have had, and I'll share with you the strategies that I use for these difficult conversations and help you be able to master hard conversations at work. So if you are joining, welcome, welcome. Glad you're here today. If you are wanting to learn how to have these hard conversations at work as a leader, this is the place for you to be this evening. Feel free to like this video if you like the content so far, and subscribe if you have not subscribed yet. I focus heavily on communication, leadership development, and helping anyone who is trying to advance to that next level in their careers, go to that next level. My main focus is working with women in leadership, but I have a lot of people on my channel that are not in that category, and I'm very happy to know that you are very passionate about your leadership skills and you want to advance. So if you have any questions as it relates to hard conversations at work, ask me in the chat below. Let me know where you're joining from, and I'm going to say hello to everyone. Hello, Camisto Clean. Hello, welcome, welcome. Hope you're doing well today. Feel free to let me know what part of this big, beautiful world you are joining from today. And if you have any questions as it relates to hard conversations, how to have them at work, this is the best place for you to be this evening, because I'm going to share with you conversations that I personally have had over the years that have been very hard. And I will share with you some of the hardest conversations that I've had so that you can learn from mistakes that I made that I wish I would not have made during that particular time frame. So we talked a bit about conversations, like why is it so hard for us to have these difficult conversations? A lot of it is because we are simply not taught how to do it. Most of us are not necessarily wanting to be engaged in conflict. There's people that are like that. But when you are in the leadership realm, you try to keep things as calm as possible so that everyone's not upset, everyone's not mad, everyone's not angry. But sometimes when we do that, we avoid those difficult conversations or those hard conversations at work because we don't want to rock the boat, right? You don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to make this person mad. You don't want to make that person mad. And you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. This is a skill that you will need to master as a leader. Having hard conversations is a part of being a leader. And if you are struggling with having these hard conversations and you're not sure how to have them, when to have them, what to say, what not to say, regardless of where you are in your leadership journey, because as I mentioned in the very beginning of this live, every hard or difficult conversation is not the same. It is not the same. They will all vary, but there will be some similarities that you can work on and learn more about so that you can be more prepared for those conversations whenever they come up. Now, I do want to say that hard conversations are not necessarily something to be afraid of. This is an opportunity for you to showcase your leadership skills to other people and to really showcase your executive presence. So when you have those situations come up where you have a hard conversation or you're planning to have a hard conversation, don't shy away from it. Don't be afraid. Don't worry, and don't feel that, oh no, I don't want to have this conversation. This person's going to be mad at me. Please try your best to go through it, because every time you go through those hard conversations, I guarantee you'll be at a place where you will learn more and more on your journey and be able to handle even more challenging situations, which is how people start to progress as leaders. So we talked a bit about why people do not want to have difficult conversations. Oftentimes we just don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to make people upset. And understood, we don't want to cause undue drama or undue stress, especially as leaders. So why is it something that we're afraid of? So let's dive deep. So let me know, when you have had to have a difficult conversation or a hard conversation at work, what did you feel? Did you feel excited? Did you feel nervous? Were you worried? Let me know in the comments below. I want to know what your thoughts are and what are some things that you have experienced as it relates to having those very, very difficult conversations or hard conversations at times. So let me know. Let me know what's happened for you. But I will share with you, a lot of times we just are just nervous. We're really nervous because it's that unknown, that lack of confidence that we talked about very much in a lot of detail yesterday. So if you did not watch yesterday's live, we talked about confidence a bit. I'm going to be doing a video on clarity also very soon, and that will most likely either be live here on YouTube or it will be live on LinkedIn, because I received a lot of votes on my poll to talk about this. Okay, so we talked a bit about why people don't want to have these conversations. What do we feel sometimes when we have to have these hard conversations? We feel those very negative or very tense emotions. We feel afraid. We feel worried. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. There's a lot of things that go into our mind whenever we having those difficult conversations. So when we know we have to have it, what do we need to do? So I want to share with you a couple of strategies that have actually helped me to be able to have very hard conversations at work. I've had a lot of them, and I have done very well with some, and some I have definitely made mistakes in. And so I want to make sure that you're not making the mistakes that I made during my hard conversations. The strategies that I use can be applied to any hard conversation that you're having. Just make sure you get a pen and a paper and write these down. I've found that these have helped me out tremendously, and I'm going to share with you some stories, some hard conversations that I've had in one of my hardest conversations in a few moments. Now, the first strategy I want to share with you as it relates to having these very hard conversations is that there is a certain amount of preparation that you do need to do. Now, I mentioned at the very beginning of this live that there are not a lot of guidance rules out there for hard conversations. They just happen sometimes. But you do want to prepare. Now, every hard conversation is going to be different. That is the truth. That is guaranteed, but there's certain things that will be consistent. And the more that you plan ahead in advance, this will help you to get ready for those very hard conversations when they come up. So what can you do? You want to think about the person you are speaking with. Think about the person. If you're having a hard conversation with someone, then I know you have some knowledge, some working relationship with this particular person to where you can have that conversation. It's hard to have difficult conversation with people you don't know. But in a work setting, you probably have some insight in terms of how this person operates, how they think about things, the world, and how you want to move forward. So think about the person you are going to have this hard conversation with. What is it that you want to say to them? How do they typically respond when you have questions or concerns that have came up in the past? Be sure to use this information to help frame your responses to guide you in terms of how you want to manage this particular person. An example of this is the following. You may have someone that you need to have a hard conversation with, and this person may be very direct. They're very direct. They don't really need a lot of fluff. They don't need a lot of nurturing, I would say. You just have to tell them what's going on and they'll be able to make that change. So before I go into the next type of person that sometimes you see, I want to say hello to Robith Vaca. Hello, welcome, welcome. Hope you're doing well today. Feel free to let me know where you are joining from in this big, beautiful world today. And if you have any questions as it relates to having these hard conversations at work, I will help you be able to learn how to master them, which will automatically be able to help you showcase yourself as a leader. So the second type of person that you may interact when you're having these hard conversations is a person who needs a lot of nurturing. They may be more highly emotional. They may get really emotional about things. They may start crying when they come into your office. And this is the reality. You may think that I'm being silly, but I'm being serious. I have had many people cry. And when you have individuals like this and you know that this person is a bit more emotional, you have to come at them and have that conversation, that hard conversation with them in a bit of a different type of way. So you want to have this conversation with them in a more nurturing way, more of a guiding way, and make sure that you are very, very, very mindful of your tone of voice. I have had people where I've had hard conversations that tend to be on the more of the emotional side in terms of how they respond. And if you say something to them in the wrong tone of voice or they feel offended by it, they will just get so upset and be angry and mad and go talk about you to other people and do all kinds of things. Sometimes you have to be direct and you can't necessarily sugarcoat a situation that needs to be addressed when there is a problem, especially when you are in the role of a leader. So keep that in mind. It depends on who you are talking to as it relates to the hard conversation that you are having. Now, the first strategy we talked about was to think about who you're talking to and do some type of preparing ahead of time. So we've talked about that. So if you want me to go into more detail about how to prepare, then let me know. I will provide you with some insights and give you some guidance in terms of some other strategies that can actually help you to do this. Now, I do want to mention one other thing before we go into the second strategy that will help you have these hard conversations at work. The second strategy is to think, well, before I go into the second strategy, I want to share with you a video here on my channel. It is one of my lives that has the most views on it right now. It is called Think on Your Feet. It is a great video for you to watch if you are in these very hard conversations that come up, because you will need to think on your feet. And it's not only helpful for those hard conversations, but it's really for any conversation you have where you need to spend some time and you need to think on your feet. So check out that video. It's on my lives on my channel that will be able to help you think on your feet. I did want to mention that because when you're in the process of planning and preparing, and you may have that very highly emotional person, you do want to make sure that you are ready to respond to them in a very quick way. Now, we're going to go into the second strategy that is very helpful when you're having these hard conversations at work. The second strategy is to choose your location wisely. You may be wondering what does choosing your location have to do with anything as it relates to having a hard conversation. If you are having a hard conversation with someone, it is best to have that conversation in a very safe space where you can speak with them freely, answer any questions, and be able to speak with them without having interruptions. So oftentimes what I've done in the past is if I know I'm having a hard conversation, I will let people know. And I'll lead into why specifically I do this in a little bit. But I let people know so that people are not coming in interrupting me when I'm having a hard conversation with someone about whatever the issue may be that they are concerned about. This is really, really important because you want to make sure that you're able to have a quiet place for that person to think and to process and to determine what it is specifically that they may need to say in response to your hard conversation. So make sure it's a place that's free of interruptions. A break room is not a place to have a hard conversation. A very public area in a hallway is not a place to have a hard conversation. You will be surprised how many people will want to just suddenly walk by if they see you as a leader talking to somebody else. They always want to know, what is the leader talking to them about? And you'll have people that try to eavesdrop and try to listen, and then what happens? If you've been in leadership for any amount of time in your life, you know what happens. People will say, oh, I saw the manager talking to Mary. I think they were about to fire her. I mean, it would be something silly like Mary's getting fired and Mary's not getting fired. You could just be telling Mary, hey, Mary, hello, Mary, how are things going for you today? But people just don't see it that way. This is the world of management. This is the world of leadership. People will want to see you and have their eyes on you all the time. So you have to get ready for that. Now, we talked about choosing your location wisely. So make sure it's in a quiet place where you can have a conversation and be able to allow them to have a conversation too. Because oftentimes when you're having difficult conversations with people, there's something that's going on with them, or there may be more to the situation that you did not know about. And you want to make sure that it's a space where they can talk about those things. Now, if you have enjoyed this information so far, then feel free to like this video. This is the exact type of content that I talk about specifically on my channel, especially as it relates to communication and leadership, learning how to read people, and also being able to develop some charisma as it relates to being a woman in leadership. And this is what I talk about. I'm very passionate about this. There's a lot of people on YouTube that are in the coaching space or in the consulting space. And what I found is that there is a lot of great information out there, but sometimes there's a certain amount of depth that's not there because oftentimes individuals have not been in the trenches, as I would say, in terms of being able to really be in those leadership situations and see firsthand those real life scenarios, those real strategies that can actually help you move forward. So we've talked about 2 strategies so far to have those hard conversations at work. So we talked about 2. So we talked about the first as being, make sure you prepare in advance, think about who you're talking to. The second as being to choose your location wisely. And the third is to have the conversation. It is very important for you to have the conversation and do not over-explain too much. This ties into the very first strategy I mentioned to you in terms of that prep work, because oftentimes what I've found that happens is when we are having those hard conversations, we feel like we have to explain a lot. Like we have to explain to the person, this is exactly what happened, and this is exactly what needs to be done, and this is the reason why this happened, and this is the reason why this needs to be done. It needs to be very, 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 very concise as much as possible in terms of what you need to say to this person, because I will share with you, in my time as a director and as a C-suite and a manager, the more information you say, the more people get confused, the more they will try to take what you said and turn it around to something else that you did not say. It happens all the time. So that prep work is very, very important to do in the very beginning, as I mentioned, as my first strategy to be able to have these hard conversations. So I want to say hello to Frankie. Welcome back. Frankie said, yep, that is true. Appreciate you being here. So if you have any questions specifically as it relates to having these very hard conversations at work, let me know in the comments below. I will be happy to give you some insights that I've experienced over the past 20 years. And after I go through the strategies that I personally use to have hard conversations, I'll talk to you a bit more about the hard conversations that I've had and the conversations for me that I made mistakes in, that I want you all to not make mistakes in, so that you can be prepared as a leader. Because sometimes, as I mentioned on YouTube, people aren't really talking about exactly what really happens sometimes when you have these hard conversations. And I don't have a problem sharing with you at all what I have experienced, because I believe it will help you on your journey. Now, we've talked about several strategies so far. So we've talked about having the conversation with someone, and now we're going to talk about the fourth and final strategy that I want to share with you as it relates to having these hard conversations, and that is to end it on a positive note as best as you can. There's certain situations that come up that are hard conversations that are very difficult to have in on a positive note. I will share some examples that I've personally experienced, and I want to know from you, what are some conversations that you have had that have been very difficult, that may have been hard for you to end on a positive note. Ending on a positive note helps to add some sense of just not making this such a tense conversation. I tend to have conversations a bit differently when they're hard conversations. I always make sure I compliment the person at the very beginning, or I will provide them with a compliment at the end, depending on the type of conversation that we're having. If they did something really egregious, then we'll talk about maybe something that they've done really well, but still ended in a very positive way. And your tone of voice is important. I mentioned this a bit earlier in the live, how depending on who you're talking to, if you're talking to someone that is very direct, or you're talking to somebody that is very emotional, you want to be mindful of your tone of voice, because your tone of voice carries a lot of weight as a leader. Oftentimes people don't really talk about this, but how you say things and what you say is very important when you are in that leadership realm. Because as I mentioned before, when I talked about what happens if people see the manager or the leader talking to somebody, they go whisper, oh my gosh, did you see this person talk to, the leader was talking to this person, they're going to get fired. I mean, they think all kinds of stuff, which is not true, not reality. But as a leader, you have a lot of eyes on you. And so you want to be mindful of what you're saying, how you're saying it, and understand and know that do the best that you can on your end. Sometimes people will take what you say, even if you said it in the most kind way, like you were talking to a child, they would still take it and turn it around. That is a part of leadership, unfortunately. So you always want to make sure that you have some support, or you have someone with you to witness the conversation, depending on the type of conversation you need to have. If it's something that's a lot more sensitive and you feel comfortable that you can have this conversation in a one-on-one setting, then definitely have that hard conversation there. However, if you believe that this conversation could at least potentially become very contentious, I would highly recommend for you to have some support. You definitely want to have that. So let me see what's in the comments below. Okay, Frankie said no questions, carry on. All right, awesome. I have to attend something, I will rewatch this. Of course, Frankie, yes, absolutely. Feel free to, it'll be on the live feed as soon as I'm finished. I will definitely have some stories I'm going to share in just a little bit. So feel free to watch it whenever you can. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you stopping by, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Okay, so we've talked about 4 strategies. There's 4 strategies that I do personally when I am talking to individuals and having those very, very hard conversations. Now, I do want to talk to you about some of the conversations that I personally have had in my career that have been very hard conversations. And I want to share with you one of the hardest conversations that I had that was something that I believe anyone can really learn from and benefit from if you are in any form of a leadership role whatsoever. This is something you have to really keep in mind. People don't really talk about this a lot when it comes to hard conversations. But if you're watching my channel or you subscribe to my channel, you just happen to stumble upon this topic today, then I know you're passionate about elevating how you're communicating and how you're managing these very complex and very difficult situations. And you're here for real solutions and real answers. And that's what I talk about here on my channel. This is where I'm going to share with you real strategies, real scenarios that actually happen. I'm not here to share with you a hypothesis of, this is what you need to do specifically when you have a angry person or you're dealing with a hard conversation. It goes based off of this leadership model and this concept. I don't talk about that here. I'm sharing with you over 20 years worth of experience that I have seen and want to get insight from the rest of you so that we can grow together as a community and be able to handle these very hard, complex situations that actually come up, because they come up all of the time. So this is where real talk happens. We're going to have real conversations about real issues that happen oftentimes as leaders, especially when it comes to having these hard conversations. Now, I hope that this information has been helpful to you so far. If you like this information, feel free to like the video. And if you want to learn more, then subscribe to the channel. It's very easy. Click subscribe. Subscribe to the channel. I have a lot of information here that I specifically share for women in leadership, but I have a lot of people in my audience that are not in that specific target audience that I work with, but they're here to learn more about leadership and communicating at that higher level than their peers, and I'm here to support them also. Now, I want to talk to you about some of the actual conversations that I've actually had that have been hard, that have been really hard. And the way for you to learn about having these hard conversations is by someone that's had hard conversations. So there's different types, and I'll share with you I'll start with conversations that were not very difficult, but are still hard. And then I'll share with you the harder conversations that I've actually had that can really help you to think about things a little bit differently when you're having these hard conversations. Now, the first hard conversation that I had, and when I had this conversation, I was not a leader. I was not a leader. I was a worker. I was a worker and I was not a leader, but for some reason, it may have been just early on in my career. I was actually an undergraduate at the time, and I, at that time, must have been conducting myself as a leader, and people felt like they needed to talk to me to handle this situation. So what's the situation I had to have with? This is a hard conversation that I personally had, and I've actually had this conversation multiple times throughout my career. And I want to know in the comments below if you have had this conversation. I want to know, because I know I've had it many, many times. So we happened to have a coworker that was not taking care of herself in terms of her hygiene. And I've had this with conversations with women, conversations with men. I've had these conversations with employees, but at the time, as I mentioned, I was just a coworker. I was not a manager by any means. And my coworkers, they talked to me and said, this particular person has a body odor, and we have to sit very, very close to each other in the type of role that we're in. And no one wanted to say this person smells. They didn't want to say that this person smells. And they didn't want to keep smelling this person. So it was a bit challenging. So they had a conversation, and I'm not quite sure if they went to the manager. I think they did. Actually, they did. They went to the supervisor and talked to the supervisor about it. That's how I'm trying to remember exactly. Why did it get to me? They went to the supervisor about it, and we had a brief discussion. It was the supervisor, myself, and there was 2 other people from what I remember. It was a long time ago. And they mentioned that this person has a body odor. And this person is very, very sweet, but we just can't sit there that close to this person with them having a body odor. Somebody's got to talk to her. That's what it came down to. So the supervisor at the time, she was a new supervisor from what I remember, and she just didn't feel comfortable having that hard conversation. Now, I will say before I go into the story more and how it worked out, was that this person had a she just didn't feel comfortable doing it. And this is something we talked about at the very beginning of the live today as to why people do not feel comfortable having these very hard conversations. Sometimes they don't feel comfortable doing it. And sometimes it makes you feel uncomfortable. You don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. You don't want to, but sometimes you have to have that conversation. So I remember us having a discussion. The supervisor at the time said, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Like, I don't want to hurt her feelings. She's so nice. I don't want to do it. And the other coworkers that were talking about the situation said, well, I don't want to do it either. I don't want to hurt her feelings. I don't want to be mean. And they asked me would I do it. And I said, okay, I don't want to hurt her feelings. I don't want to be mean, but I guess if you all aren't going to do it, then I'm going to have to do it because this is a situation. Like, we're going to have to address this for sure. So what I did was I had a conversation with the person. And I pulled him to the side and I thought about how can I have this conversation? And this is before I even became a manager. This is before I became a director. This is before I became a C-suite. This is before all of this. So I've been working on these skills for more than 20 years. I just didn't know it at the time. And so I thought about it and I said, well, how would I want someone to speak to me if there was something wrong with me? And the first thing I thought about was just to have some sense of decency about it and to speak with them in a very, very kind tone, because you're telling somebody that they smell. And that is something that's very personal to people, and that can really, really hurt somebody's feelings, crush their self-esteem, and completely destroy their confidence. And so you have to be very, very gentle with these type of conversations, because if you don't, you can really impact somebody in a very, 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 very negative way. You may never even see this person ever again in your life, but you may be impacting them in a very negative way, especially for something that as it relates to like odor of someone. And what I did was I pulled this person to the side, I talked to her, and I led into the conversation and said, oh, it was so great to talk to you today. We had a really busy day at work. How are things going for you? And we just had a brief chat. And I asked her, I said, well, I want to talk to you about something. So I've noticed here recently that there's been a bit of change in yourself. So I've noticed that sometimes there is a odor that comes from you. Is everything okay? Like, is there anything that you want to talk about, or is there any changes that are going on that I can maybe support you in or provide you with some guidance in? And you know what came out of it? What came out of that conversation is that this person said that they were just busy. They just had a lot going on. They're just trying to pay their bills. And sometimes they wake up late because they work another job and they get tired and they just don't get the chance to just put on deodorant. Basically, that's what it came down to. And the deodorant that they do have was a different brand of deodorant. And I said, oh, okay. Well, that's really good to know. I know how incredibly busy life can be. And I completely understand how just balancing everything, working a job and being able to, go to 2 different jobs back to back. I can only imagine how hard that is. There's something that you may want to try to do. So you may want to try a different type of deodorant. Maybe that will work better for your body chemistry. And she said, okay, what deodorant are you referring to? And so I mentioned to her Degree. I personally use Degree myself. I've been using that for decades now, but I use Degree. And I said, well, I like Degree. Degree is a really great deodorant. They have different scents. I found that when I'm really busy, Degree works very, very well, and it will last for a long time. So maybe try Degree and see how that works out for you. And she said, well, I really appreciate you for having that conversation with me and talking to me about it and helping me before somebody else says something. And I said, of course, sure, no problem at all. Feel free to let me know if you need any support with anything, and let me know how the Degree deodorant works out for you. Just let me know how things work out. So you may be wondering, okay, that sounded like a hard conversation. And it was, because this is a conversation I didn't plan on having, and I was not in the manager role to have it. But as many of you know, as leaders, sometimes things get dropped in your lap anyways, even if you're not really prepared for it. This is the welcome to the wonderful world of leadership. This happens all the time. But what I will say that happened as a result of that is that this person stopped smelling. There was no more body odor from her. She was fine. We had no problems with her after that. And I share this story with you because this is how you have hard conversations. This is the reason why I share with you personally what I've dealt with, because I wanted to be able to support you and help you when you're having these hard conversations. Look, everyone, leaders, I know it's hard out there, and it's hard when you have to have those hard conversations. You don't know how to, sometimes you don't know what to say or how to say it, no matter of what level of leadership you're in. You can be at the most senior level of leadership, and you may be having one of the hardest conversations that you ever had, and you never knew you were going to have it. So take my very short story that I shared with you about one type of hard conversation I had, and I hope that this helps you on your journey when you're having these conversations and dealing with difficult cases, difficult conversations, hard conversations. There's a certain way you have to have it when you have those hard conversations. And I will tell you by far, one of the most important, I would say, a couple of things outside of the strategies I mentioned at the very beginning of the live or in the middle of the live that you want to do is have empathy. You do not know what people are going through. You have no idea. And so you may be seeing the external manifestations of someone who has gone through a family crisis. Maybe they had a death in their family. Maybe they had something happen with their kids. Maybe they're going through a divorce, or maybe they're going through a transition at school, or maybe something is happening to where they can't do things like they used to, or they may have health issues. You just never know what people are dealing with. And so when you're having those very difficult and hard conversations at work, be sure to have that sense of empathy as a leader and try to put yourself in that person's shoes. And I guarantee you, if you can just do this for just a moment while you're having a conversation with someone, then it will allow you to really be able to elevate yourself as a leader and make you just a better person. I've seen it happen many, many times, and I'm sharing this from my personal experience and over 20 years of being in these type of higher level leadership roles. These are the things that really do matter. And the way you make people feel will have a lasting impression on them. So you want to make them feel empowered when you're having a hard conversation. It shouldn't necessarily be the mindset of, the queen on the throne, the king on the throne looking down at the peasants. It shouldn't be that. It should definitely be a co-working type of conversation where you can really help empower somebody to make the right decision. We've all been in situations where we've done things wrong. I know I've done things wrong. And can you imagine if someone would not have had that type of conversation with us? Where would we be? We would probably be doing something different. So empowering someone in a difficult or hard conversation is something that you definitely want to make sure that you are doing when you're in those situations. Now, I will share with you a few more stories. If you all want to hear them, then stay tuned and hang in there with me, because I do feel like this is something that a lot of people on YouTube don't talk about. They talk about, how to have these conversations. This is what you should do. This is what you should not do. But let's talk about conversations. Let's talk about real conversations that have been had and how they were handled and what was the result. Now, the next conversation that I've had that has been hard, that are hard conversations to have, these conversations are in the alignment of terminations, when you have to fire someone. Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever had to do this? Have you had to fire someone as a leader? And let me know if you feel the same way. It is a hard conversation. It's always hard. Now, sometimes you'll have those scenarios where someone really is doing something very egregious and this person just cannot be here. They have to be in another place. They're endangering people. This is not safe. or they're just really, really impacting the organization as a whole and your team. Those conversations are somewhat easier to have, but what about those conversations when you have a coworker or a team member that's just not meeting the mark? They're just not meeting it. You're trying to help them meet it, but they just keep dropping the ball. They're not able to really keep up with everyone. Those are very hard conversations. So I'll share with you a conversation that I personally have had many, many years ago. That was a very hard conversation I had when I had to terminate someone. So the conversation started off as any conversation that I would have. So I did a couple things first, and actually I've done many of these, but I let a few key people know I'm having a conversation with this person and they're going to be terminated. Now, key people is not just employees that you just talk to and say hello to. These are your other decision makers. So if you are a leader or you are in a C-suite role, a manager role, a senior VP role, or in senior leadership, these would be the individuals that are your direct reports. So these are the people that need to know that you're going to be terminating somebody. And when you have those type of conversations, especially as it relates to termination, make sure you obviously have your human resources department involved. Sometimes they will actually do the terminations for you. But then sometimes you as a leader, you do it yourself. It just depends on what's going on and the dynamics you have with your human resources team, if they feel comfortable with you doing the terminations or if they feel like they have to step in. Now, in my specific situation, I'm just giving you an example of one that I've had to do in the past, is that this person was just not meeting the mark. There was a couple things that were happening, and they continue just not to, they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it. And we all really like this person, but they just couldn't do it. So what happened in this particular case is that, hold on, excuse me, just one second. I got to sneeze real quick. Okay. Sorry. So what happened in this particular conversation is that we led in with talking about where they were. So we had a couple of conversations previously. You can't just terminate people just to terminate people. I mean, there's a process to it. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes as a leader, you may want to do that, but you just can't. You have to have a process to this to termination. So there's conversation we had already previously had with this person and about them improving and putting them on the PIP and trying to help them move forward. It just didn't work out. So what happened? So I had a conversation. And basically led a conversation with, I know that you've been making some milestones or trying to make some milestones in this specific discipline, but I found that it seems like it's still a bit challenging for you. So there's a couple of things that we want to just share with you that may be helpful as you are navigating through your career and some things that you might want to improve upon. And so I went ahead and listed the things that they could improve upon, what they may want to help. And I just told them, I said, this is where we are. I've really enjoyed working with you as a person, but at this point, it will probably be better for you to be in a different type of setting that might be either slower pace or maybe a different type of environment for you to really be able to move forward in your career. And at this point, we will have to end our employment with you. And I would go through the logistics in terms of, when they'll get their last pay and, be able to provide them with the information for your human resources team and have that conversation with them and just leave them with some encouragement and say, this may have not been the right fit for this particular organization for you, but there is an organization out there for you that will be able to support you and put you in that better place that may be able to help you move forward as you're trying to build up your skills and build up your knowledge and etc. And I end it like that. I don't necessarily ask if they have any questions. This is not the time for you to do that. Not if you're doing terminations. As I mentioned, I'm talking hard conversations today. But for terminations, you can't open the door like that. Do not do it. Do not do it. I've seen it happen, not from me personally, but I've actually seen other people open the door after termination when you said someone is going to be terminated, and it opens the door. It surely does. And it's not the door you want to go down, because it can turn from being okay, like the person's just in shock, to the person is loud, angry, about to come at you. You don't want that. So do not open the door. Sometimes if you're having terminations, and you want to definitely talk to your human resources team and just make sure if they have any additional guidance they want to share with you as it relates to having these hard conversations. It really just depends. And this is something that I found to be hard conversations because you don't know how people are going to respond. You'll have people that will be very angry. You'll have people that will cry. You'll have people that will just be silent in shock. And they're hard. These are hard conversations that we have. But I tell people all this all the time. Hard conversations, difficult conversations, tough talks, all of those things, they have to be had. But there's a way that you have them that makes it more empathetic. And put yourself in someone else's shoes. When you're having that conversation, you know what you need to talk to them about, then talk to them that way. You don't want to be mean. You don't want to be rude about it. Some people are, and some people just happen to be mean and rude regardless. So this is something just to keep in mind. Talk to people the way you want to be spoken to, and have that conversation. Oftentimes, what I see leaders do when they are having these type of hard, difficult conversations with people is they come at it from, I am the leader. They come from, I am the leader and I can tell you anything I want to, and I'm the one that knows everything. I'm the Wizard of Oz. I know it all. And I found that that's not the way you want to have a conversation, especially a hard conversation with someone, because you'll come at them and have that conversation in a very condescending, very mean way. And you may not think that you're doing it that way, but you are, because you're just telling them, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, and you're fired. Okay, how is somebody going to respond to that? But if you try it in the way that I just illustrated a moment ago and shared with you when you're doing your terminations, it will help to ease the tension. There's already going to be tension there because it's already a hard conversation. But it will help to ease the tension a bit to where it's not as stressful. Now, with some of your terminations, whenever they come up, you will need to go a bit deeper into how you want to respond. So let me be specific about this. I know this is going to sound bizarre, but I'm telling you, hang in with me. There's a reason why I say this. When you have to do those hard conversations like terminations, you need to let multiple people know. The people that are your direct reports, they need to know, because if something goes in a way we don't want it to go, there needs to be a way to get this person out of the building quickly, or you need to have security on standby. And many people say, well, why do you have to do that for terminations? And if you've ever been terminated and this has happened, there's a reason why it's like that. And I know it may seem like it's harsh, but you never know. And it's not necessarily a direct reflection of you as an employee. You may have been a wonderful person, but something may have happened where it didn't work out. But ultimately, you have to really protect yourself as the leader, because you just don't know. You have no idea what's going to happen. Sometimes you just don't know how these conversations are going to go. So this is another hard conversation that I personally have had. I've had this conversation many times, and that's how I approach my terminations. I do come at it from a place of empathy. I really very, very closely monitor my tone of voice. I'm very concise with what I say. I do not open the door for a discussion, to have a long chat about something. We may have a brief chat, but it's very controlled. Like, I make sure it's controlled, and I always make sure that I have somebody with me to be a support or a witness if I need to, depending on how things go. Now, that's another conversation that I've had. Now, a third conversation that I have had that is a hard conversation, this is a difficult conversation to have, is when you have to lay someone off. These are hard conversations, and I'm going in level of difficulty in terms of the conversations I've had. This is a hard conversation. I don't like these conversations, and especially when you have these conversations where your hand is forced, so to speak, to have it with someone that you don't want to have it with. I've been in that situation before. I've done this not many times. Layoff conversations are not conversations I've really had to have that often, because most of the time I've been doing well business wise where I can keep things afloat and keep people. But when COVID happened, this happened a lot. A lot of people got laid off from jobs, and I didn't like these conversations. Like, I don't like having those conversations, but you know what? You're the leader and you have to sometimes. So when it comes to conversations about layoffs, as I mentioned earlier, you always want to consult and have a conversation with your human resources team. Do you feel comfortable having this conversation as a leader? And if you don't, that's what human resources is for. For me personally, I'm always comfortable to have hard conversations. Don't have a problem with it. I didn't really need support as it relates to that. But when you're having those conversations as it relates to layoffs specifically, you have to keep in mind what I mentioned to you before. The same type of strategies I mentioned at the beginning of this live are the same type of strategies that you're going to want to have in any hard conversation you have, even layoffs too. You want to make sure you have your things together, who you're talking to, and all those things. So if you are just joining, welcome. Make sure you watch the replay. This is a longer live on Fridays. I go longer because I have time to go longer and spend with you all to help you be able to provide you with some real strategies, real techniques, and etc. And I do want to say before I go into layoff conversation, if this information has been helpful, feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. And if you're at a point in your leadership journey where you want to get some additional support as it relates to elevating yourself, how you're communicating, and going to that next level of leadership, then reach out to me for an executive strategy session. I'll be able to provide you with some guidance, some insight, and some tools that can help you accelerate your career growth. And if you are looking for a deeper transformation where you know that you have been called and you have some very major things you're going to be doing in your life, and you want to make sure your leadership skills are at that executive level, or you're at an executive level already and you're transitioning into consulting or entrepreneurship because you've reached that area, that level of your career, contact me for the Real Executive Woman. It is a transformative experience that will help you get to that next level, especially as it relates to being able to communicate at a higher level than your peers, having that executive presence, and really presenting yourself as that leader that you want to be. Now, layoffs, as I mentioned, are similar, in terms of how you have those conversations with people. It is always challenging to have those conversations, but you still want to lead in with, similar to the termination conversation I mentioned to you earlier, lead in with gratitude, thanking them, appreciating what they've done, and then just explain the situation. There's been some changes, or there's been some cuts, there's been some unexpected shifting of resources, whatever it is that's actually going on. And I would be honest. Please don't lie to people, especially when you have really hard conversations. Just be honest and just tell them what you can tell them. If there's something that is sensitive that you can't share, then don't share it. But tell them what's going on, because keep in mind, they are going to talk to other people. So it needs to be something that you would say to a group of people, but keep in mind that you're saying it to one person, because they will eventually tell other people what you said, because you're the leader. People always want to know what the leader has to say. But just tell them what's going on, why you have to do a layoff, and I would provide them with any information they need to have in terms of collecting unemployment benefits and conversations they may want to have with human resources, and provide them with any other guidance that you can. I know for me personally, when I've had to have those hard conversations as it relates to layoffs and etc., that I have, if they have been a fantastic employee, I've been able to provide them with some guidance, and I would tell them that if you need some assistance or if you need a letter of recommendation, then I'll be happy to do that for you. I provide that resource so that they don't feel so defeated. It's already hard enough as it is to have a hard conversation, and then to find out that you're being laid off. That's hard. It's very, very hard. So you want to make sure that you're ending things as positively as you can in those very hard conversations, and to monitor your tone of voice. Please, it is so critically important for you to watch your delivery and how you are speaking to someone in these very hard, difficult conversations. Now, I'm going to share with you one more difficult conversation. Now, this is the one I want you all to learn from. And if this information has been helpful to you, feel free to like this video so it gets out to more people. And if you know someone that has been struggling with this, specifically these difficult conversations, then share this video with them. Share this video with them so they can learn how to not have these challenges. You can get through difficult conversations and hard conversations. It's just a matter of how you have it. You can have it. It's just the way you say it. So this is a great time for you to subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. And give me just 1 second. Let me just grab a sip of water before I go into how I had one of the more challenging conversations in my career. So just 1 moment. Okay, fantastic. Now, the hardest conversation that I've actually had in my career has been the following type of conversation. Now, this is the unexpected difficult conversation. I had planned on having a conversation with someone about something that was important, very important, but it was it was a hard conversation I had to have. I was the leader at the time and I just had to have a conversation. Now, what happened specifically is that this conversation went from hard conversation to, mildly hard conversation to contentious, feeling threatened conversation. And to the point where I was concerned about my safety. So I want to share with you what I did that was wrong so that you don't make these mistakes. And I share this with you because I want you to be at that next level and learn from the mistakes that I made. So this happened many years ago. And so the conversations that I mentioned to you earlier about terminations and layoffs and making sure you have somebody nearby, you tell people what's going on, all of this came from this conversation I'm going to share with you right now. This is where I learned what it means to have those very contentious conversations where people are really, really, really upset, where you feel threatened physically, and how you need to make sure you avoid these situations. I mentioned to you that this conversation it was a hard conversation, but it was not intended to be as hard as it became. And I think that the person I was speaking with may have had some other things going on with them for them to just go and act in this way from 0 to 1,000 literally in about 2 minutes. So what I did with this person, okay, these are the mistakes that I made when I had a hard conversation. So learn from my mistakes, get a pen, get a paper, and write these down so you do not make these mistakes as a woman in leadership or in a leadership role. Please don't make these mistakes. The first thing I did that was a mistake, and this is all in retrospect, is that I had that hard conversation, which I knew I needed to have it. I had to have this hard conversation. That was something I had to do. I had to have the hard conversation, had to document them for what happened. The first mistake that I made was I had this conversation at the end of the day. In retrospect, I would not have had this conversation at the end of the day. And let me share with you why I would not have had this conversation at the end of the day. Because there was no one else in my direct vicinity in the building. I had someone with me as a support to have a witness, but there was no other people in the building. And that was a bad idea. That was a very, very, very bad idea. We talked about yesterday what happens when you make those bad executive decisions and how you have to learn from it and move forward. Well, this is my learning from it and moving forward lesson for you all. Don't have conversations that are difficult like that at the end of the day. Sometimes people say to have it at the end of the day, but not at the very end. You know, it may be the hour before the end of the day. So if you end your close of business is at 5, you may want to have this hard conversation at 4. Not at 5, not at 4:45, not at 4:45, and not at 5 o'clock, because I put myself and the coworker that was with me at the time in a very difficult situation with this hard conversation, because we didn't have any exterior support. We had no exterior support because it was just the two of us and this person that we were talking to that became very upset. So don't have conversations at the very end of the day, and definitely make sure that you are not in a building or a suite by yourself and you don't have any additional support in case you need it. So that was my first mistake I made. The second mistake that I made is that I assumed, and I say assumed, that this person would understand what I was saying and understand, oh, okay, yeah, I probably should have not did that. I assumed that. There's an acronym for assume or a saying for assume. I'm not saying that, but I assumed that this person would understand because this person in particular was somebody that I felt like would probably understand why this was probably an issue. So I assumed. And I would say moving forward, what I learned from this particular incident that happened is that don't assume anything. Any conversation that's a hard conversation can go from 0 to 1,000, being in a negative way, very fast. And you don't want to assume that you know how the person's going to respond. That's why you need to let people know you're having a conversation so that you can plan accordingly and have that discussion to make sure that you are covered on your end in case anything goes in a very negative direction. So though that I learned that mistake, I made a mistake there. I assumed that the person would somewhat understand what was going on because it was something that was important. It wasn't like someone was hurt, but it was something that was very important that this person knew better to do. Now, I talked to you about the two mistakes I've made so far. So the first mistake I made was having the conversation at the end of the day. The second mistake I made was to basically assume that they would, not that they would be okay with that. I knew there'd be some issue, but just assume that they understood what I was saying. The third mistake that I made, and this is one that I'm really big on now that I talk to you all about so much, is I did not pay attention to this person's non-verbal cues in their body language. I did not pay attention to it as closely as I pay attention to things now. I say this because I probably would have picked up on some cues from this person early on in this hard conversation that would have caused me to say, you know what, the conversation's over and end it there. I didn't pay attention. And so this is a mistake that I personally made, and I don't want you all to make this mistake. I didn't pay attention to nonverbal cues. So you might be wondering, well, what specifically do you need to pay attention to in these type of scenarios? Pay attention to their eyes. Their eyes are going to tell you a lot. Pay attention to their body language. If they start shifting, they're telling you they're uncomfortable with what they're saying. If they're starting to squint their eyes a bit, like, I don't understand, or making that kind of face of, I don't understand what you're saying, those are things to pay attention to. Pay attention to their hands. Oftentimes you may see people like, put their hands on their face or, kind of rub their face, or they may scratch their hair, or they may grab the chair. These things happen, and you may be saying, wow, we're going very, very deep into this today. I'm telling you, real life scenarios, these things have happened. I've experienced this, and I don't want you all to go through what I had to go through when you're having a hard conversation. So you may have somebody grab the chair. They may grab the chair. They may shift. They may move their hands on their face a bit. They may kind of like move their hands. They may have a pen that they're kind of popping the top off the pen. There's a lot of things that people do with their body. And I say this on my channel often. Your body will tell and show what you really don't want to say. And so when you're having those hard conversations, you have to, even though it may be a friendly person, normally, you still as a leader need to assume that this conversation could go in a different direction very fast. Even if it doesn't, you still have to have that in your mind that it possibly could. And so paying attention to somebody's non-verbal cues, their body language is critically important when you're having a hard conversation, which is the reason why my very first strategy in this live was that you will need to prepare in advance. So if you prepare what you have to say in advance, have an outline, make sure you don't go into a ton of questions. This will make you have the ability to know what you need to say, but it allows you to focus on the things that you do not know are going to happen. So if you've already prepared and you know what you need to say, then you already have that rehearsed for the most part. But you can use your eyes, or you can pay attention or get a sense of what's going on with someone if you are observing them directly, if you have the ability to see them directly. This is why it's important to prepare. So using the strategies I mentioned at the very beginning of this live will help you to have these hard conversations when you're having them. So I've shared with you 3 mistakes that I made. The first mistake was what? The first mistake that I made was to have it at the end of the day. The second mistake that I made with a hard conversation was to assume that this person understood that what they did was probably not correct, even though they knew it was incorrect. Don't assume. Third is that I didn't pay attention to their nonverbal cues. I probably could have picked up on a few more things and picked up that this conversation was going in a bad direction quickly if I would have just paid a little bit more attention to them. The fourth mistake that I made is that I tried to over-explain. When I saw there was some contention, some back and forth, I tried to over-explain. And one of the things that I learned from this situation is that when you're having hard conversations, difficult conversations, do not over-explain. You need to have a very, 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 very concise script, I would say, that you're going to be saying, but you don't want to say it like a robot, like you're reading out the paper. This is what you did today, and this is the reason why we're having this conversation. Please do not do this again. You don't want to look like you're reading a script. You still want to have that dialogue, that conversation with the person, but don't make it to where it's like they're talking to a robot. Nobody wants to do that. So make sure you are doing that. Make sure you're having that conversation, but don't banter. Don't banter back and forth in a difficult conversation. So before I go into I think this is my last mistake. I'm going to share that with you. I want to say hello to Emma for you. Hello, welcome back. Hope you're doing well today. If you have any questions, specifically as it relates to having hard conversations at work or with a peer, then this is a channel for you. Definitely let me know if you have any questions specifically. We've been going live for about 67 minutes so far. This is definitely one of my longer lives, and I wanted to make sure that I provide you all with some real strategies, some real techniques, real life scenarios that I personally have faced when it comes to hard conversations, so that you all can learn from the things that I've done right, and you can learn from the things that I have done incorrectly. So I'm just shared with you a couple of scenarios, and I'm going into the critical mistakes that I made in a very, very hard conversation. So I share with you that, making sure that we go through this process. The other mistake that I made outside of the 3 I've mentioned, and the 4th in terms of over-explaining, was to not end the conversation immediately. I should have ended the conversation and not tried to, I don't want to say appease this person, but try to lessen the conversation, because I should have just stopped it. I should have said, okay, I see that this is not going where we would like for it to go. Let's regroup another day and have this conversation. Close my laptop, pack my stuff up, and start walking out the door. That's what I should have done when I noticed the conversation was going in a very, very, very challenging, contentious situation. So you might be wondering, like, what happened? What happened? Why did you feel like this? Well, I felt physically threatened. This person started to grip the chair and start to push their fingers together. Not like they were going to lunge for me, but their nonverbal cues, when I finally picked up on them, it was a little too late at that point. This person was already showing very, very active signs of aggression, that they were mad, and it wasn't mad that they were just mad, angry, mad, what I'm saying. No, they physically were mad, and I felt threatened. It was very awkward. It was very tense. It was very contentious, and to the point where I felt my safety was being questioned. And when I left, finally, when we got this person out the room, for a very long time, and I'm being honest with you all, for a very long time, I had to really watch when I walked outside. I had to watch where I walked to my car. I kept my eyes open all the time to look around to make sure I didn't see anybody coming at me or anything like that. That's how contentious this conversation became. And I hope that this information I'm sharing with you, my personal hard conversations that I have had, helps you in some way, even if it's a small way, for you to think of things differently when you have hard conversations, and how you can mitigate these conversations and prevent them from escalating to being what you don't want them to be. Now, the end result was the person ended up not being with the organization anymore after that, and that was it. I mean, this was years and years and years ago, and so they went there. They decided to resign, and they decided to go to another place. So it ended up working out, but I will tell you, there was a point in time in our conversation that was very, very contentious, that I was actually worried for my safety. And I don't want you to be in that situation. I don't want you to make those mistakes that I made. Now, how would I have done this differently? So this is going to be a very good summary of our conversation about difficult and hard conversations. How would I have done this differently? So these are the things I would have done differently in this type of situation. So I hope this information is helpful. If it is, let me know. We are going on 70 minutes live here on YouTube, and I'm giving you 70 minutes of knowledge that will absolutely help you on your journey. And I hope that this is one of the videos that you share out to a lot of people, because I know people struggle with hard conversations, and this is something that people really, really, really do want to do better in. And I'm hoping that what I'm sharing with you, or I'm confident what I'm sharing with you, is going to help you in some way, shape, or form to have your hard conversations as a leader, as a woman in leadership. These are the type of scenarios that people don't really talk about on YouTube, or they're definitely not spending over 70 minutes of their time explaining to you and sharing with you stories in terms of how these hard conversations can truly be handled in a very, very graceful way. So I wanted to share with you a very good summary in terms of what I would do in a hard conversation now. I've talked about it briefly, but I want to do a big summary, especially since I've shared with you the hard conversations I've had, and even the hardest conversation that I had. What I would do if I was in a specific leadership role and I needed to have a hard conversation with somebody, these would be the steps that I would specifically take to have this hard conversation. Are you ready? You're going to want to get a pen and paper and write this down. If you haven't been writing anything down yet, get a pen and paper and write these steps down. This is exactly what I would do. The first thing that I would do is, if I have to have a hard conversation with someone, is I would think about my strategies I mentioned to you before. So I would think about the person. Who am I speaking with? How do they typically respond to direction or guidance, or even compliments? Like, how do they respond? Once I figured out who it is I'm speaking with, then I start preparing. What specifically do I need to say? How can I keep this as objective as possible in this particular conversation? I don't want to go off emotions. I'm not going off of, I feel like this, we felt like this, I believe that. No, talk specifically about the facts that actually happened. What actually happened? And go into it in that way. And I would prepare my talking points. So my talking points would be, just as I mentioned before, I would start at the very beginning. Thank you for being here today. I know today was really busy, or have some type of way to ease into this hard conversation that I'm going to have, that I'm going to make sure I turn it around so that it is not so hard, so it's not so complicated. So I talked about those two things. The next thing I would do would be to pick the location. So find the location where I want to have this conversation. Do I want to have it in an office? Do I need to have it in a specific area? Where do I need to have this conversation? Because I need to make sure this conversation is in a location that is strategic for me as strategic for me to get out of here if I need to get out of here or get this person out of here. So I got my place. I have a couple things together. I know where I'm going to have this conversation. So the next thing that I would do is to have a conversation with the people that I trust or people that I trust at work that are my direct reports and let them know I'm going to be having a conversation with Mary, and we're going to be talking about something that is that could be a difficult conversation. You don't have to go into detail with what you are talking with that person about because it is perhaps not their business. But if they're your direct, like if you have a direct report, then your direct report needs to probably know what's going on, like what's happening, because more than likely you're going to have that person there. But if you have somebody that is a direct report but maybe doesn't need to know everything, then you can just let them know I'm going to be having a conversation with Susie, Mary, whoever, and let them know that you're going to have this conversation. So if you could just make sure that you are in this area here in front of my door or near where we're going to have this conversation, so you can make sure that no one comes to interrupt us. Now, I would even have a next layer. If the direct report gets pulled away, I usually will put a note on my door that says do not disturb or in a meeting to let people know that do not come in here. Do not come in here. And I kind of established with my team that if I have a note on my door, then unless it's a fire, like the building is literally on fire or something's going on, please don't come in unless it's urgent, because I normally would not do that. So I got that. I have that lined up. Then I would let the people know who needed to know. I would let security know too. Now you may be saying why, but I hope after you've listened to my live and I shared with you the difficult conversations that I've had or hard conversations I've had, that you understand why this is important, why you need to know this. So if you do not have security, then you need to at least make sure you let your human resources team know. Now, human resources is not security, okay? Human resources is not your security. They're not. But you will want to let them know what's going on and have a conversation with them. Do they need to be present? The reason why I did not have human resources present because I could handle difficult and hard conversations. Other people and managers may not be able to do that. They may need that human resources support. And depending on your organization, they may just handle those hard conversations themselves. That it just depends. But I've always been in situations as a manager and a director, as a C-suite, where people pretty much just let me just handle it because I can do it. But I would let definitely human resources know before you have a hard conversation with anyone, so you can plan ahead. If you have security, then let security know. If you do not have security, then you definitely want to make sure that your direct reports, or at least two people, know, outside of maybe the immediate person in the room, know what the plan is. You're going to have a conversation with this person. It should be friendly, but in case it does not go in a friendly way, then what we'll need to do is I need you to help me get this person out of the building, or we need to make sure they get out, or we need to make sure they don't go into a specific area where they might be disruptive to other people. So that is the next thing I would do. Then I have my plan. I have my game plan. Like, I know if this conversation is friendly, it's going to be friendly and we'll be fine, and we'll go through it and we'll come up with a plan to help them move forward. If it decides to go into a more contentious way, then I have a plan of action that I need to do. And I have a plan of action to get them out of the building or to get us out of the building if I need to. And this is worst case scenario. You may be thinking that I'm doing overkill, but unless my leaders, you have been in a situation like I've been in, and you've dealt with some really contentious situations like this, then you will think it's overkill. But until you are actually in it, then you will say, okay, no, this makes sense. And if you've never been in that situation, I hope you never are in a situation like that. But this will help you to really be at that next level as a leader in how you're communicating with other people and handling those very, very hard situations that come up as women in leadership. So I've shared with you, that's my game plan. That's how it happens. Now, the next thing I would do is have that conversation. So I'm having that conversation with this person and being able to talk to them, go through the process that I mentioned to you earlier. I've already prepared. I know where I'm having it. I've let my direct reports know, and I'm being very concise, very strategic in my conversations and discussions. I'm not going into a lot of detail. I'm just saying exactly what the issue is or what the challenge is, how we can move forward. How can we move forward from this challenge? We can get past this, right? We can get past this. And I say it in a very, very kind and very empathetic way. And I make sure I hear them out depending on the type of conversation. If it's a layoff, there's probably a little more conversation there. If it's a termination, there's definitely not that much conversation there. If it's just having that difficult conversation, I may ask them, what are your thoughts? Or what was going on at this particular time when this event happened? So I would go into that also. I would say, what were your thoughts? What's going on? To open it up so you can determine how to engage the conversation. And this, after I'm going through the conversation with them, this is the time where you should watch Think on Your Feet on my channel, because you definitely want to learn how to think on your feet. Now, because you may have situations come up where you just simply don't know what to say, but thinking on your feet will help you. If you want me to dive deeper into Think on Your Feet, just like I did into the difficult and challenging conversations here, then let me know in the comments below. I'll be happy to put something together for you and just take that deep dive into it just for you all. So I've had the conversation. Now I'm ending it on the positive note. This person is either going to be leaving in a positive way or they're going to be leaving in a negative way. And if something really egregious happens, then you may have to just end the conversation very, very quickly. One of the things that I would do if I had my talking points already prepared is what I mentioned earlier. Pay attention to their eyes, eyebrows, their eyes. Are they squinting? Are they grabbing the chair? Are they clasping the chair? Are they, are they wiping their face? Are they scratching their hair? Are they crossing their arms? What is their body language telling you that their mouth does not want to say? These are the things I would be paying attention to if I was having a hard conversation with someone, so that I know what to do. And as soon as you pick up on any one of those type of body language or nonverbal cues, then I would say a check-in. And this is how you start to gauge what's going on. I would say, I'm noticing that you're grabbing your arms. Is everything okay? Or I'm noticing that you're grabbing the chair. Are you okay? Is there anything else that you want to say? What are your thoughts about that? Like, I would ask those very open-ended, coaching-like questions so I can see, where is this person coming from? Like, what's going on? What's going on in their mind right now? And this is why I have on my profile and LinkedIn, it says learn how to read people. This is how you read people. You have to pay attention to their body language and how they're responding to things that you're saying. And after that, hopefully the conversation goes well and you have your hard conversation. You document it. Please do that. A lot of leaders make that mistake where they do not document. And when they come up to human resources and say, oh, I want to get rid of this person, or I need to let this person go as a leader, human resources is looking at you and saying, why? There's nothing documented about this person. Why would you? What's going on? We can't just do that. So make sure you document your difficult conversation or hard conversation if you have not informed human resources about it for whatever reason. But if you have, then at least they already know what's going on. I encourage you to have a very good conversation with your human resources team. This is whether you are a leader in an organization or a leader in your business. Make sure you're having that conversation with them. Or if you're not having it, then just follow what I'm mentioning to you as a guideline. Now, of course, there's always variations to it. This is my disclaimer. I'm just sharing with you my humble experience, what's worked for me over the past 20 years. But I do want to also mention that human resources is a great resource for you when you have those hard conversations. But if you need to do it yourself, then I have been able to provide you with some value here to help you. So if you had a conversation, you document it, and then you just let everybody know conversation is done. So your direct report will obviously be in the room with you. You'll need to have someone with you. Somebody needs to be present. Don't have the conversation by yourself unless it's something that is extremely sensitive, that is not a difficult conversation. If it's a difficult conversation, you need to have somebody in the room with you, period. I would not have conversations that are difficult or hard in the absence of another person. Please don't do that. That puts you in a very, very, very risky situation in all types of ways. Conversations can be misconstrued. They can be turned around to say something that you did not say or things that you did not do. Just please trust me on this. Make sure you have somebody with you. And so I already mentioned at the beginning, I would have had a direct report with me, but I would have had other people know that I'm having a conversation, but not necessarily tell them what I'm talking about. So that if things go south or if something doesn't go in the way that I'd like for it to go and it goes negative, then at least I have a plan in place. Majority of the time, leaders, you are not going to have this as a problem. This will be just a difficult conversation you have with somebody, and if you end it on a positive note, it will not be as hard. That's why it's so important to be mindful of how you say things, what you say, and etc. But I do want to mention to you that there are a few times where you may have those hard conversations that escalate, and I just want you to be prepared for any conversation that comes up, if it escalates or not. Now, I have shared with you a lot of insight. I've shared with you several of my own personal stories of hard conversations that I have actually had and how I was able to mitigate them. And I've also shared with you some very, 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 very critical mistakes that I made with hard conversations that you can follow up on and make sure that you are not making those same type of mistakes, so that you are really empowering your team when you have those hard conversations. I know this is a topic that people struggle with as leaders, and you don't have to struggle with this anymore. Let's just have a conversation about it. If you have any insights and conversations you've had, put them in the chat, put them in the comments below, and let me know some things that have came up for you specifically as it relates to those hard conversations. And as I've mentioned, if you are wanting to get maybe some more customized support, so what would that look like? Maybe you are having these hard conversations, but you find that you are emotionally so charged when someone tries to argue with you that you start to react back to them in an emotional way. That's where you might need some additional support from an executive coach like myself. If you are very just worried about these hard conversations and you want to get just maybe some more personalized, more customized support in terms of what's making you feel that way and why are you struggling with this so much, then reach out to me for an executive strategy session. This will be a great time for you and I to have a conversation about where you are, where you plan to be, and how I can help you to get to that next level in your career. Because if you can master the way you are observing and reading people and how you are communicating and communicating at that advanced higher level than your peers, there is nothing that is going to stop you as it relates to your career. Nothing. You will be able to accelerate your career and go to different heights in your career and even into a different level. So you may be a seasoned executive where you have reached that level. You're at the C-suite level and you're thinking, well, what's next? What do I do next? You can go into consulting, entrepreneurship like myself, or do other things. But mastering how you communicate with others is critically important for you to do. So an executive strategy session will be able to support you on that. Look in the description below. I'll be happy to have a conversation with you, just maybe a brief chat to figure out where you are, and then we can determine what type of strategy session you need, how much time do you need, how many topics do we need to cover. We can go over options in terms of how we can work together. If you are looking for some next level support and you really want to make that transformative change in your life, then I encourage you, while I have space still available, to sign up for the Real Executive Woman. Contact me for a strategy session in the link below. We'll talk a bit about where you are, where you need to be, and I'll let you know if the transformative experience to help you to become that amazing leader that communicates at a higher level than their peers is something that'll be good for you. Of course, as women in leadership, there's a lot of things that we struggle with, especially in these type of leadership roles where sometimes we may be in fields or in industries that have been heavily dominated by men, and we're just trying to figure out, well, how can we still be our authentic selves, have our executive presence, but still be able to interact with other people and other men in different type of settings where we can still position ourselves as leaders and as authorities. That's what the Real Executive Woman is about. There's challenges that we face all the time, and some of those challenges are specific to gender, and some of those challenges are not specific to gender, which is one of the reasons why I enjoy being here on YouTube, because I can communicate with people that are in my direct audience, which is women that are in leadership roles, or people that are just very passionate about leadership, and they may not be in that audience of my target in terms of women in leadership. So I hope that this information has been incredibly helpful for you. I know we have been live here for how long now? We're going an hour and a half. This is 90 minutes. So this would be the equivalent of a masterclass as it relates to being able to have those very hard conversations with other people. So I encourage you to just share this with other leaders, other women in leadership, or other leaders in general, to provide them with this insight and this resource that will help them have these hard conversations. I know a lot of times we don't really talk about hard conversations or how to have them, and people just find themselves just so incredibly frustrated with hard conversations. So my prayer is that after you have spent 90 minutes with me, that you feel better about how to have a conversation that may be more difficult, or that you at least feel empowered that you can do this. And I want you to feel empowered that you can do this. You can have this hard conversation. You're going to get through it, and you're going to become that amazing leader and continue to elevate yourself, because every hard conversation you have is going to be different. But every hard conversation, I will tell you, will help to advance you as a leader and will help to elevate your executive presence. Now, let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. One of the things I am going to talk about here very soon is the most voted topic. The most voted topic out of my platforms that I have placed polls on has been confidence and clarity. That has been the most voted topic. So I'm going to have to do a detailed live on this topic specifically to help everyone in my audience with these particular type of situations. So if you have any questions, let me know. I appreciate you all for being here and spending an hour and a half of your time with me. I'm very honored that you're here, and I appreciate you all for being so supportive on the lives. We've done a lot live-wise. I've been doing so many lives, as I've mentioned in several of my videos, that YouTube has noticed that I've done a lot of lives. And so they've invited me to be a member of the YouTube live streamer research panel, where I provide insights and feedback to them as it relates to live streaming on the platform. So this is contributed to me being present and you all being here and engaging with me. If you have any questions, let me know. And if you want to get a sample of how to communicate at that higher level, definitely check out my lives. I have a lot of lives here that can help you. I have an executive communication masterclass that is listed on my website at exciteexcellence.org under products and services. It is for professional women. If this is something that you're trying to just get some more insight in and you're not quite sure where you want to go, there's a lot of ways I can support you, either in a one-on-one setting directly or through another masterclass. But this topic here that we've discussed in terms of having hard conversations is definitely the equivalent of a masterclass. I'll have to determine how I want to repurpose this, because we did go into a lot of information here, and it's on YouTube right now. It may be something I repurpose for a masterclass at a later date, but we'll see. Right now, I just want to help you all, and I just want to support you on your journey as leaders, as women in leadership, to really elevate yourself and how you're communicating. So I appreciate you being here, and I will see you all next week in the next set of lives, and I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye for now.